The Devil in the Flames. We don't feature these that much, but have been sent in a few recently and find them fascinating. Images in flames have been around for years, and some show clear images of people, animals, or even the devil. But what do they mean? Are they just cases of pareidolia, or are these images trying to tell us something? Back in 2015, Ashley was recovering from an eating disorder and decided to symbolically burn a pair of jeans she wore at a low weight to show she wanted to recover. She took a photograph of the burning garment as a reminder, although at the time she remembers feeling a bit uneasy. Later, when looking over the photo, she spotted what looked like a human/horse-like beast in the center of the flames. Take a look. Ashley has only shown a few people the image and they cannot see it, but when she showed it to her late mum, she immediately said, "That's anorexia, it's a demon." Those words have stuck with Ashley ever since and helped her with her recovery. We can definitely see a dog-like creature. Let us know what you can see. The Little Boy in My Room. Tracy grew up in a quiet suburb in southeast Michigan, just outside of Detroit. In a small cookie-cutter ranch-style house with 3 bedrooms upstairs and 1 downstairs, she lived with her mum, dad, and 6 brothers and sisters. Although by the time Tracy came along, there were only 5 siblings living at home. Her eldest brother was in the Navy and did not return to the house to live after his service was done. What Tracy didn't know until she was 4 years old is that there was another little boy that lived with them named Freddy, but he was a ghost. Tracy would learn when she was older that he had been haunting them way before she was born. Tracy found out about Freddy after she woke in the middle of the night to see a boy standing next to her bed with his arms outstretched like a cross. Immediately she realised it wasn't one of her brothers, as he was too short. She couldn't see any features, but knew it was a boy. Tracy quickly let out a small whimper and covered her head with a blanket to hide from him. She then peeked out to see if he was still there, but he was gone. At the time, she was unaware of Freddy and was scared to tell her mum or dad because she had a feeling that if she talked about him, he would reappear, so stayed silent. Every summer, the family would go camping, so when they went that year, Tracy felt safe enough to tell her mum as they were outside of their house. So as her mum made sandwiches, Tracy came out with it and said, "Mum, there was a little boy in my room." Her mum apparently froze and started asking her questions about what he had looked like. Later that night, Tracy heard her mum telling her father, when they thought she was asleep, she heard them say Tracy saw Freddy in her room. When Tracy was older, her mother and brothers told her about Freddy. He was a distant relative of her mother's who had lived in the house before them. One day, Freddy's dad was taking him to a baseball game and didn't see a back hose blade sticking out into the road. He hit it and Freddy flew out the window and his dad ran over him. Freddy was killed instantly and he was only 6 years old. This explained why on one occasion, Tracy saw Freddy in his baseball uniform. It was white with vertical blue stripes, and she only saw him for a split second before he was gone. Freddy could be mischievous. Often he would try to get attention by changing television channels while the family were watching something, and only stopped when they yelled, "Freddy, stop it." He would also mess with the lights, and they would often flicker. The whole family saw Freddy at one time or another. Even Tracy's highly skeptical father, who until he saw Freddy with his own eyes, would berate the rest of the family for believing in ghosts. He was a no-nonsense army sergeant and didn't believe in all that stuff. That was until one night when he was in bed with Tracy's mum, and they saw what her father thought was his youngest son pass their bedroom door and go into the living room. However, Tracy's mother knew it was not their youngest son because the boy's feet had not been touching the floor. Tracy's father got up to reprimand his son for being out of bed so late and to send him back, but he couldn't find him anywhere. He then looked in his son's room, and there he was fast asleep. When he went back to bed, he said to Tracy's mum, "Maybe you're not all crazy," and never spoke of it again. If any of them mentioned Freddy in front of him, he would turn his gaze somewhere else and stare off into the distance, ignoring the conversation. Freddy seemed to have a special liking for Tracy's brother Matt, and he pestered him the most, to the point that Matt would yell at him to leave him alone. Matt would wake up to see Freddy sitting on the twin bed across from him, with his elbows on his knees and his chin in his hands, just watching him sleep. Other times, he would be at the foot of the bed, pulling his covers off him, giggling. Matt would wake up to see his little eyes peering over at him. "Stop it, Freddy, leave me alone," he would yell, and then Freddy would disappear. When Tracy was around 6 years old, her mother and Matt decided to get an Ouija board to try to find out what Freddy wanted, and when they asked him what he wanted, the indicator spelt out the girl. Then they asked if it was Haley he was talking about, and it pointed to yes. They then asked if he thought Haley was pretty, and he indicated again yes. After the Ouija board session, the activity in their house intensified greatly. The TV started turning on in the middle of the night, with the volume full blast, waking everyone up. The family also started seeing shadows of multiple people reflected on the walls, like they were moving around, but just shadows and no actual people making them. One night Tracy was laying in bed, facing the hallway, with the bedroom door open. She was wide awake and staring into the hallway, and the next thing she knew, everything went pitch black. She then heard screaming very faintly over and over again. After a few minutes, Tracy realized that it was her screaming, and she opened her eyes to her mother and father shaking her and asking her what she was screaming about. Tracy hadn't a clue, and still doesn't to this day. On another occasion, the whole family were in the dining room, which was part of the kitchen, when suddenly they heard the back door fly open, slam shut, and someone run down the basement steps. They all went quiet, and Tracy's dad went down into the basement expecting to find an intruder, but there was nobody there. It was just another of Freddy's pranks. Tracy is now grown up and has since married and moved out of the house, as have all of her siblings, but they all had to share their childhood with the ghost of little Freddy. EVP recorded in Florida graveyard. This EVP recording was sent in by Stephen. He recorded it back in May 2017, when one night he and a group of friends went ghost hunting in Indian Springs Cemetery in Florida. Before we play you the clip, just a bit of background on the cemetery. It was built in 1886, and its name derives from a small spring nearby that was thought to have been used by native tribal dwellers. It's one of the oldest cemeteries in the area, and over the years plenty of paranormal activity has been reported, including ghostly orbs floating over the headstones, disembodied voices, shadow figures, and screaming. Stephen captured the EVP when he broke away from his group of friends with his recording device to prevent any background noise. At the time he didn't hear anything after asking some questions, but when he listened back, this is what he picked up. It's worth pointing out, the first voice you hear is not Stephen, but the last you hear is him, completely unaware at the time of the other voice.
It really is
pretty creepy. It does sound like a child or young woman, similar to other reports of strange voices coming from the cemetery. What do you think? Did Stephen catch the sound of a ghost on his device, or is there another explanation? Shadow person. H is 31 years old and from the UK, although she is currently living in Germany. But many years ago, when she was living in the UK, she stayed with some relatives for the weekend in a Scottish town called Bollock. She wanted to spend some quality time with family and help around their new house. During her visit, H was to sleep in the top bunk bed and desk combo of her little cousin, while he slept on the couch down the stairs. His room had a door in the ceiling that led to a loft with a sturdy ladder leading up to it, and her cousin liked going up there. When H first went up the stairs to the room she was to stay in, she immediately noticed that it was a lot quieter, as if the downstairs room were much further away. And as she entered her cousin's bedroom, she found that even quieter. A little creeped out, H put her rucksack away, but didn't feel like she was alone, and at first assumed her cousin had followed her up the stairs. She also heard footsteps, but when she called out to her cousin, he didn't respond. Despite the logical conclusion being that her cousin was probably playing around, H felt a heaviness in that room that felt pressing. It was like the air in there was thicker somehow. When she went back down the stairs, H asked her cousin what he was up to, but her aunt told her that he was with her, his dad, and his little sister the whole time. That made her feel even more uneasy. but she dismissed it and assumed it was some kind of misunderstanding, or perhaps even a seagull that had landed on the roof and was pottering about. That night, however, was the most terrifying night H had ever experienced in her life. As she lay in the top bunk, facing away from the wall and towards the window, H didn't feel at ease enough to turn her back to the room. The door in the ceiling was open because her cousin had played up there before bedtime. H just didn't like what she was feeling. The pressure in the room was a lot worse at this point, and she kept looking around the room, because she had such an awful feeling of dread. She then noticed that the room got a lot darker in the corner and from the ceiling, but the darkness kept growing and it seemed like it was moving towards her. As it approached her, H could hear whatever it was breathing. It gradually got louder. H considered her options. Cousin number 1 was downstairs sleeping, and the rest of the family were fast asleep as well. All the while, the breathing was getting closer, so much so that she shifted her weight to the far side of the bed with her back against the wall. It felt like the mass was just looking at her, breathing, but it was angry breathing, as if someone was huffing through their nose. At some point during the night, she fell asleep against her will, and when she woke up in the morning, she had a massive headache. H was due back at her parents' house that day, so without mentioning anything to her aunt or uncle, she thanked them for having her and left. H loved her aunt and uncle very much, and didn't want to insult them by telling them how creepy their son's bedroom was. When she got home, her mother greeted her and said she looked tired. H told her that she had had a late night and was going to have a bath and relax. But as she was heading up the stairs to run her bath, her mother called her from the kitchen. "I'm glad you had a lovely time, sweetheart. You'd never know that someone died in that house." H immediately felt sick and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She went back through to her mother and asked her to clarify. She said she didn't know much else, so H left it at that. Over the years, she has tried to talk to her mother about what happened that night, but she never really took her seriously. She did mention it to H's aunt, who was annoyed and insulted by the claim, so H decided not to mention it again. Nearly 9 years had passed, and one evening when H was out for dinner with family and friends, her mother asked her to tell the story of that night. Immediately, the pressure came back, but she still told the story. One of the people at dinner, who was into paranormal, believed that H experienced a shadow person. A shadow person or shadow being is the perception of a patch of shadow as a living, humanoid figure, and is often interpreted as the presence of a spirit or other entity. With the history of death at the house, it is possible that this is what she saw. H told us that even writing the email to tell us about her experience made her nervous, and believes the energy of that night has never really left her. The Cursed Bedstead. This encounter was sent in by Amy, and it happened to her over 16 years ago when she was 12 years old, and was the first of many unexplained things to have happened to her and her family. At the time, Amy had just moved in with her father, who was and still is an antique collector. One day he came home with a beautiful, little bit worn out bed frame for Amy's bedroom. The frame was easily 100 years old, and he told Amy that he and her brother had recovered it from a dilapidated house in St. George, New Brunswick. However, in the next breath, he casually mentioned that after they had retrieved the bed, the room collapsed, and they had a lucky escape. He just assumed it was their intrusion into the old room that had caused it. Amy thought nothing more of it until about 2 weeks later, when strange things started to happen. Amy was used to her stepbrother coming in her room and shaking her bed. He would ask her to make him a sandwich or some other demand, and Amy would always yell back, "Do it yourself." He would then pop up and proceed to throw things at her. It was a sort of jokey thing they had going on. While a few weeks after Amy started sleeping in the old bed, it started to shake, and immediately she thought it was her stepbrother. But after she yelled at him, he didn't pop up and throw things like he normally did. Thinking he was messing around, Amy crawled towards the end of the bed to curse him, but she was surprised to find he wasn't there. The bed stopped shaking as soon as Amy reached the footboard. She was a little spooked out, but didn't mention it to her family and hoped it was just a one-off occurrence. However, soon after, her dad, brother, stepmother, and stepbrother started mentioning strange incidents, such as things moving, loud noises coming from nowhere, and even muffled voices. Initially they tried to ignore it as best as they could, until one day when Amy was home alone, her stepmother had cooked a roast the night before, and Amy took it out to make a sandwich. It's worth pointing out that Amy's stepmother wasn't good at cooking meat, and to say the meat was well done was an understatement. After making her sandwich, Amy called a friend, and during their conversation she started to hear a strange sound. She told her friend what was happening, and she went into the kitchen where the sound was coming from. To her horror, she looked at the joint of well-done beef, and it was dripping blood onto the floor like it was alive. Amy panicked and took a knife to the joint to try and find the source of the blood, but could find nothing. She was crying on the phone to her friend and ran outside, waiting for her dad to come home. When he finally arrived, Amy told him what had happened, but he just laughed and said she was being dramatic. That was until he went into the kitchen and saw the blood all over the floor. He had no explanation for the blood. A couple months later, the house burnt down. The investigation turned up nothing substantial that could have started the fire, and the family lost everything, apart from the bed frame. That remained completely untouched. Needless to say, the family did not take it to their new home, and nothing untoward has happened since. Amy is convinced the bed frame was either haunted or cursed, and was pleased to see the back of it. This is the first time Amy has publicly told her story, and will probably be the last, as the memory has haunted her for the past 16 years. The Vending Machine Murders. In 1985, the Japanese company Otsuka Pharmaceutical was noticing a slump in sales of its health tonic drink, known as Aronomin C. To boost sales, they launched a campaign offering a free bottle of Aronomin C when purchasing a vending machine drink. As was typical with the Japanese, many of the unwanted free bottles would either remain in the slots or be placed on top of the vending machines for someone else to enjoy. Under normal circumstances, this would just be seen as a kind gesture. However, to a cruel, psychopathic killer, it presented the perfect opportunity to indiscriminately kill by poisoning. On April 30th, 1985, a 45-year-old truck driver from Fukuyama, Hiroshima, went to purchase a drink from a vending machine in the city when he spotted a bottle of Aronomin C on top of the machine, so he took that instead and drank it. Soon after, he fell seriously ill and displayed symptoms of severe poisoning and internal chemical burns. The medical staff could not do anything for him other than confirm the exact poison that was killing him. It was paraquat, a deadly chemical often used in weed killers that is banned in several countries due to its adverse effects on humans and animals, although in Japan it is readily available and is often used to commit suicide. Paraquat is so toxic that if it just touches human skin, it will cause blisters, and quickly sinks deeper, burning blood vessel walls. If ingested, it is even more lethal and burns holes in the esophagus, inflames tissue around major blood vessels, and causes irreversible damage to internal organs. As little as a teaspoon of it nearly always results in death. A few weeks after drinking the poison, the Fukuyama man died an agonizing death, and a police investigation was launched. Then on September 11th, a 52-year-old man from Osaka suffered the same fate after drinking a free beverage from a vending machine. He died 3 days later. By the end of September, there were a further 3 deaths, all as a result of drinking Aronomin C. 4 more people died in October and 2 in November. All took free bottles, some from the top of the vending machine, but most from the depositing slot. A 17-year-old girl from Saitama, who died on November 24th, was the last victim. After that, the killings stopped as inexplicably as they started. The police worked hard to bring the person or persons responsible to justice, but they hit a brick wall. The poisoner was clever. They chose vending machines in obscure places that had no CCTV and few witnesses, and left no DNA traces. The 12 victims were killed indiscriminately in different locations with no connection between them, entirely at random. In fact, it looks like the randomness of the deaths was part of a sick game the murderer played, like a twisted version of Russian roulette. The only thing connecting the victims was that except for the last one, they were all male. With no evidence and no significant leads, the case went cold, and after 25 years it passed the statute of limitation, a law that has since changed. There is now no chance of getting justice for the 12 innocent people who died horrific deaths from what could well have been a sick prank. The Glico Mourinho incident and the monster with 21 faces. You may have heard of Pocky, the chocolate-coated biscuit sticks in various flavours that originated in Japan that are now sold around the world. But what you might not be aware of is that the company that makes them, Asahi Glico, was once embroiled in an extortion and kidnapping case that cost them millions. At around 9 PM on March 18, 1984, Asahi Glico president Katsushia Asahi was bathing his 2 young children when 2 masked men armed with a pistol and rifle entered his home. The intruders had stolen a key to his home from the next door neighbour, who happened to be Katsushia's 70-year-old mother Yoshi. After entering Katsushia's home, the men tied up his 35-year-old wife and his eldest daughter. Immediately his daughter offered the men money, but it seemed that was not their motive, and one of them responded by saying, "Be quiet, money is irrelevant." After cutting the telephone lines, the 2 men located Katsushia in the bathroom, and after he put up a fight, they abducted him naked from his home and took him to a warehouse in Osaka. The next morning, they called the director of Asahi Glico and issued a ransom demand for 1 billion yen, about $4.2 million, and 100 kilograms in gold bullion. The director immediately informed the police. However, things didn't go to plan when on the 21st of March, Asahi managed to escape from the warehouse and raised the alarm. Thankfully he was unharmed, but was unable to provide any information about his kidnappers, as they placed a bag over his head the entire time. But the extortion attempts against Glico did not end there. On April the 10th, vehicles in the parking lot of the company's headquarters were set on fire. Then on April 16th, a plastic container containing hydrochloric acid and a threatening letter to Glico were found in Ibaraki, demanding a one-off payment to end the harassment. Soon after, the perpetrators started sending a series of taunting letters to Glico, the media and the police. The letters were signed off with the name, the monster with 21 faces, inspired from the villain of Edogawa Rampo's detective novels. Some of the letters claimed to have laced Glico candies with a potassium cyanide soda. Glico took the threat seriously and pulled its products off the shelves of shops and supermarkets. The move cost the company more than $21 million and resulted in 450 workers losing their jobs. But this wasn't the end of the incident. The monster threatened to place the tampered products back in stores, and following the threats, a man wearing a Yomiuri Giants baseball cap was caught on CCTV placing Glico chocolate on a store shelf. The footage was made public, but the letters kept coming. One of the letters received by the media and the police read, Still, the police were no closer to catching the culprits, and after 3 months of trying, a letter was sent that read, and the company received no further correspondence from the monster with 21 faces. However, they then turned their extortion campaign to other food companies using much the same tactics. One of those companies was Madurai Ham, who, unlike Glico, agreed to pay the 50 million yen the monster was asking for to stop the harassment. A plan was agreed for Muradai employee to throw the ransom money onto a local train heading towards Kyoto when a white flag was displayed out of the train window. Instead of a Muradai employee, the police sent an undercover officer instead, but whilst travelling on the train to the drop-off point, the officer spotted a suspicious-looking man watching him. The man was described as a large, well-built man wearing sunglasses, his hair cut short and permed, with eyes like those of a fox. When the officer reached the drop-off point, the white flag was not displayed, so he followed the suspicious man from train to train. When he disembarked at Takatsuki Station, the fox-eyed man boarded a Kyoto-bound train and managed to escape the officers who were tailing him. But worse was to come. The monster sent a letter to the media addressing it to the mothers across Japan, threatening to lace Mourinho confectionery products with cyanide. The letter caused mass panic in Japan, and this was worsened when products in shops were found with notes attached to them warning that they were poisoned with cyanide, and when tests came back, they confirmed some of the products were in fact poisoned. Mourinho now seemed to be the focus of the monster's attention, and on November 1st, 1984, a letter arrived at the Tokyo home of the company's vice president. Morinaga responded to the criminals by placing the missing persons advertisement in the local newspaper morning edition. They were also forced to remove all their products from sale and reduce their production by 90%. But the monster wasn't done. Next, he started harassing the House Foods Corporation, and after weeks of threat, with the help of the police, the company agreed to pay the 100 million yen to the monster. This is when investigators took a second look at the fox-eyed man, but again things did not go to plan. En route to the drop-off point, investigators spotted the fox-eyed man in a station wagon. They followed him as he headed to the drop-off point, where they had been instructed to drop the money in a can under a white piece of cloth. When they reached the drop point, the white cloth was there, but the can was missing. The stolen station wagon was later found abandoned. Inside the car was a radio receiver that had been eavesdropping on radio communications between the police officers involved in the drop-off. They also recovered a vacuum cleaner, although no fingerprint evidence could be retrieved from it or the car. Following the blackmail campaign, police released a facial composite of the fox-eyed man to the public. Quickly, suspicion fell on a man called Manabu Miyazaki. But despite him bearing a striking resemblance to the fox-eyed man, police checked his alibis and cleared him of any wrongdoing. Miyazaki later wrote a book about his experiences of being the #1 suspect in the case. Although no one was poisoned as a result of the 21 Monsters extortion campaign, the perpetrators were responsible for one death. Shiga Prefecture Police Superintendent Yamamoto, who was in charge of the investigation, could take no more and killed himself in the most awful way by setting fire to himself. This seemed to prick the conscience of the monster, and 5 days later, on August 12, 1985, the monster with 21 faces sent its last message to the media. Following this message, the monster with 21 faces was never heard from again. Yamagami family disappearance. On June 4, 2001, 52-year-old Junko Yamagami was scheduled to take a business trip to Dalian, China, for the travel company she worked for. Before leaving, she was due to attend a meeting at her office, but by noon that day, Junko hadn't shown for her meeting or her flight, and her colleagues began to get worried. They checked her house where she lived with her husband and mother-in-law, but nobody appeared to be home. The family dog and her husband's car was also missing. Soon after, Yamagami's daughter, a 26-year-old schoolteacher named Chi, was also reported missing. Chi lived alone in an apartment in a nearby city, but it was known she had visited her parents the night before. A friend of hers confirmed that at 9:30 p.m, Chi picked up some makeup from a colleague and then headed for her parents' home in the small mountain town of Serra. The Yamagami's neighbours also confirmed they heard a car door close at around 10:50 p.m. What they heard was either from Chi's car or it was the sound of Yamagami's leaving. The family's newspaper delivery man reported that the car was missing when he came around 4 or 5 a.m. the next day. Authorities discover the Yamagami's front door was locked, but the back door was open. Nothing in the house appeared to be disturbed. The kitchen light was left on, all of their beds were made, and breakfast had been prepared. However, strangely, the Yamagami's pajamas were missing, and while their shoes had been left behind, their slippers were gone. Junko's luggage and the 150,000 yen she needed for her trip were also inside the house, as was her husband's pager. It seemed that the Yamagamis suddenly dropped whatever they were doing, took the family dog, and left the house in their pajamas and slippers. But the question was, why? A year into the investigation, the case seemed to be going nowhere. They had established that the Yamagamis had a good reputation and were not involved with shady or dangerous people. The husband, Masahiro, did have some money problems, but nothing serious enough to leave town. Then on September 7, 2002, police recovered a car that was found submerged in a reservoir. The car contained the bodies of the 4 Yamagamis and their dog, although strangely, no cause of death could be determined, and there was no signs of an attack or a struggle. The car was found in a neutral state, and Masahiro's window was down and the whole family was still strapped in their seats. The state of their clothing made it impossible to tell whether they were wearing their pajamas or slippers. Because Masahiro was in the driver's seat, police believed it was a murder-suicide or group suicide, although there seemed to be no evidence to support this, and what would be the reason? There was speculation that Junko was having an affair, and that it really was a suicide of some sort. Another idea is perhaps they were on the run from someone, or somebody forced them to leave. But who jumps in their car in their night clothes late at night and drives off for no apparent reason and ends up dead? 20 years on, the mysterious late night trip and the deaths of the Yamagami family has never been solved. Sabono Spa Incident. The Sabono Spa Hotel, located in Uzu, closed in 1982 and was barricaded up and left abandoned. However, because it was reputed to be haunted, it became a magnet for explorers and ghost hunters. It is well known that the Japanese believe in hauntings and ghosts, and youngsters often explore haunted places as a test of courage, or kimodameshi as it's known in Japan. Kimodameshi is usually played in the summer by teenagers. At night, the youngsters visit scary places such as cemeteries, haunted houses or dark forests to carry out specific missions to test their courage. On the 5th of May 1996, 19-year-old students, Ako and Biko, who lived in Himi City, Toyama Prefecture, told their families they were going to play kimodameshi at the abandoned spa. The two girls were classmates at the prefecture high school, and at the time, Ako was a company employee and Biko was a super clerk. At around 9 PM, the girls set off in Biko's Subaru Vivivo car, and en route they stopped to buy batteries for their flashlights. They also stopped off at a nearby park, where they met some friends. At about 10 PM they left the park and headed to the hotel, and witnesses confirmed seeing the girls driving on National Highway No. 8, near the border between Toyama and Name-Rikawa City, just outside of Uzu City. When they reached the city, they again messaged friends and family to let them know their location. But no one knows if they actually made it to the hotel, as the girls and their car disappeared without a trace. Despite appeals and searches for the girls or their car, they have never been found. Many theories have been put forward over the years. Some believe the girls were lovers and ran away together to escape the wrath of their families, although there's not much evidence to support this. Another theory is that the girls were kidnapped by North Korea, a plausible explanation as North Korea has a history of kidnapping Japanese citizens, something that we may talk about in a future video. Others believe they reached the hotel and were taken by the evil spirits that supposedly reside there. However, the most plausible explanation is that the girls ran off the road and are lying at the bottom of a lake somewhere. But where, nobody knows. What's your thoughts? Okiko doll. Now, we've covered some pretty creepy dolls on this channel, but we think the mystery of Okiko beats them all. In 1918, 17-year-old Akichi Suzuki was touring the Sapporo region of Japan for a maritime exhibition, when he noticed an enticing little doll in a shop window. Thinking it would be perfect for his 2-year-old sister, he used the last of his money to purchase the doll. She was exquisite, standing at around 40 centimeters. She was dressed in a traditional kimono and had raven black hair that was styled in a traditional or kappa cut. Her eyes were a mesmerizing, glistening black color. When Suzuki gave the doll to his little sister, Kiku, she immediately fell in love with her and treated her like a little sister. She even named the doll Okiko, the same as herself. The pair were inseparable, and Okiko played every day with the doll and took it everywhere. The doll never left her side. Then a year later, tragedy struck. Yellow fever had descended on the community, and the little girl succumbed to the disease. Okiko died gasping for air, in pain, and afraid with the doll held firmly in her grasp. She was just 3 years old, and her devastated family wanted her buried with her favourite doll. However, circumstances and governmental oversight meant the doll was never laid to rest with Okiko. Instead, the family kept her on the family's altar, a common practice in certain Japanese households to commemorate the dead. And that is when things started to get strange. The family started to notice that the doll's hair was getting longer. Her once neat, traditional haircut was growing into a mangled mess of ends that reached down past her waist. It was scruffy, different colours, and felt odd. At night, they started to dream of Okiko, and sometimes the doll would appear by their side in the morning. The chilling events intensified and developed into full-blown acts of spiritual infestation. Lights flickered on and off, there were strange noises in the house, and odd voices were heard, especially around key dates like Okiko's birthday and the day of her death. Over time, they were convinced that their daughter's soul lived on within the doll. In 1938, the family relocated to a different neighbourhood. They had by now become accustomed to Okiko, and had even grown fond of their daughter's restless spirit. To them, it was an opportunity to interact with their dead daughter. Because they wanted to keep that bond intact, instead of taking the doll to their new home, the family approached the local temple and asked them to take care of her so she could stay close to Okiko's grave. The priests happily accepted, and over time, they too confirmed the claims the family made about the doll. Significantly, that the hair does indeed grow. They even sent a sample of the hair for scientific analysis, and it was confirmed that the hair was that of a human child. As the years passed, the doll's frame grew and her powers developed, and she started invading the dreams of the priests and those that came to visit her. To this day, her hair continues to grow, and in the latest update, it's claimed that her mouth is slowly opening, and if you look closely, she has baby teeth growing. Okiko doll is located in a private shrine on display in a little wooden box in the Manam-jin Temple in the town of Iwamizawa, Hokkaido, Japan, and she is available to visit if you dare. Uninvited wedding guest. This old photograph was sent in by a long-time viewer of the channel called Philip. The photograph is of his aunt Caroline's wedding service in the year 1984 at her local church in County Limerick, Ireland. It shows his aunt being walked down the aisle by her father, Philip's grandfather. But if you look in the top right window in the left pane, just above them, there appears to be an uninvited wedding guest. The photo was taken by Philip's great-aunt Pauline, but no one noticed the anomaly until 2010. After seeing the figure, Aunt Caroline was so spooked she visited a medium, and they believed it was the spirit of Caroline's grandmother, who passed away a few weeks before the wedding. She also had the photo and the original negative checked for any signs of tampering, but there was no explanation for the anomaly. Caroline has said she doesn't feel like it was a bad omen or anything. After all, it was the happiest day of her life, and she is still happily married all these years later. However, she has always felt like someone or something is watching over her. It's worth pointing out that at the time the photo was taken, the church had nothing outside those windows, and there was only a very small window still outside with a sheer drop below, and there were no bells, lamps or lights that could cause a reflection. So what do you think it was? Creepy face in photo. Cindy lives in a small town in between Manchester and Liverpool called St Helens, and this is the story of her experience growing up in her childhood home. It was a creepy house in an area known as Clockface, and it always had an uncomfortable vibe to it. Cindy experienced many odd things, including scratchings on the walls, her cat freaking out over nothing, as well as other unexplained phenomena. Before the family moved into the home, it belonged to an old man who had recently passed away, and as soon as they moved in, Cindy's parents could smell cigarette smoke coming from downstairs at odd times of the day when neither of them smoked, and they believed this was linked to the old man that lived there previously. However, one incident stood out and still scares Cindy to this day. It was the first time she was left alone in the house. She was excited but slightly paranoid. As she took a shower, she could hear laughing and keys jangling. Thinking it was her mum and brother trying to get in, she looked out the window but couldn't see her mother's car. So she got out of the shower and looked down over the banister. Cindy was shocked to see the keys to her front door on the floor. In a panic, Cindy locked herself in the living room and phoned her mum crying. Not long after, Cindy was laying on her bed and took a photo of herself. Her bedroom was directly above the living room with a connecting chimney breast. Cindy 100% believes there was something in the chimney breast, as all the strange activities seemed to happen near it. When she looked back at the photo, she noticed a creepy looking face on the wall next to her foot, which just happened to be the chimney breast. What do you think? Spon Street Ghost. Medieval Spon Street in Coventry, UK has a long history of paranormal activity. Over the years, businesses in the area have reported tales of strange knocking noises, being touched by unseen hands, and mysterious footsteps, and on one occasion, one business owner found 4 of his sewing machines turning on and off by themselves. The Ostler's restaurant on the street also claims to have had regular visits from a ghost which they named George, who was blamed for stock flying from shelves, glasses being smashed, and stones being thrown at customers. A witness at the restaurant also claimed to have seen the ghost of a woman at the top of a flight of stairs. Possibly the same apparition was spotted by Mr. Gibbons, who at the time was a miner at Coventry Colliery and also an amateur artist. He was exhibiting paintings of the 1984 and 1985 miners' strike at the Picture Gallery at 167 Spon Street, when he recalls seeing the figure of a woman come up the stairs to the gallery and turn at the top before disappearing through a wall. The description of the ghost matched that scene in Ostler's restaurant. Later, the picture gallery was turned into an art supply shop, and the new owners all experienced stock moving and pictures being moved. The new owner claimed to know when the ghost was present because she could smell evening in Paris, a perfume popular in the first half of the century. After researching the story of Spon Street, we were intrigued when Clark sent us this photo that his wife took about 3 years ago when she was photographing buildings for her university art project. Take a look. Clark's wife didn't see the figure in the photo until after she was looking back at them the day later. Nowadays, Spon Street's old buildings have been remodeled, but reports of ghostly goings-on have still continued. So was this the apparition of a ghost, or is there another explanation? What do you think? Never dabble with the spirit world. This story was sent in by a viewer who wants to remain anonymous, so we'll call her Sue. In 2013, Sue lost her daughter after a full-term stillbirth. Understandably, she was absolutely distraught and desperate to know her daughter was okay and safe in the afterlife. Sue prayed for answers but could find no comfort, so she decided to try and contact a relative who had passed. Sue used various methods to try and contact the spirit world, including a spirit board, chanting and seances, and even offered up her own blood as a sacrifice. However, in her desperate quest to find answers about whether her daughter was okay and safe in heaven, she inadvertently invited evil into her life, and instead of getting the peace she sought after, her life turned into a nightmare that is still ongoing to this day. In 2016, after a year of terror that included her clock always being struck at 3 AM in the morning, even with new batteries, unexplained knocking, photos being thrown, pictures coming off of her walls and ending up on the other side of the room, despite the hook still being in the wall, and sleep paralysis almost every other night, Sue also started being physically attacked. She was constantly being scratched, having her hair pulled and being pushed, and even though she had recently moved, things hadn't gotten any better. Just take a look at this one photo of scratches she received. Sue is still terrified and doesn't know what she has invited into her life, and wanted to share her story as a warning, not to dabble in the spirit world because nothing good will come of it. Box Hill Murder. A has always been extremely sensitive to the world of spirits, and back even before this incident, she had foreseen the death of her best friend. In 1992, A was a teenager, and like all teenagers had an argument with her mum and left the house in a huff. She met up with her then boyfriend who had a car, and they decided to drive to Box Hill for peace and quiet. Box Hill is an area of outstanding beauty in North Downs in Surrey, UK. The drive there was fine, but after entering the Box Hill area, the weather started to change. Thunder clouds rolled above them, and to make matters worse, the car suddenly started to play up. They ended up pulling into a car park where there was a pub to call for help. Within an hour, a man came out to look at the car and couldn't find a problem, and the car seemed to spring back to life. So they continued to drive to a spot on Box Hill. Once they parked up, they started to talk about the weather as the clouds were becoming darker and darker, and lightning started to streak the sky. During this time, A was aware clairvoyantly that her best friend came through spiritually smiling at her. She shook this off, and her then boyfriend started to kiss, when suddenly there was a bang on the side of the car. It made them both jump, and it sounded like someone was punching the side of the door. Freaked out, they decided they should drive somewhere else. And as they drove off, they both looked around to see if they could see anyone, but no one was there. As they drove to another spot, thunder was clapping above their heads with streaks of lightning coming closer and closer. By this point, A was completely freaked out and called on her best friend from the world of spirit to protect her, as she knew the banging on the door earlier was a bad omen. As she prayed clairvoyantly to the spirit world, she saw a man with dark hair who started to laugh at her and mock her for praying. He told her his name was Daniel, Danny for short. A then felt the sensation of being stabbed. Her boyfriend also said he was getting a strange sensation too, and admitted that every time he looked in his rearview mirror, he seen someone else's eyes in place of his own, and he wanted to murder her. At this point, they both decided to go back home, as things were getting too weird. Fast forward to 2003, A and her then husband experienced the same thudding on the roof of the car, just like in Box Hill all those years ago. A saw blood everywhere, and started seeing a person called Daniel and a rubbish bin. She brushed it off again. Then in late 2004, A's father's neighbour suddenly disappeared. Later, his body was found in Box Hill, and his name was Dennis Bates. A's dad told the police a strange man knocked on his door, saying that Dennis was in trouble and was laying low. The man was later arrested and charged with Dennis's murder. That man's name was Denny or Daniel Riley, and Dennis's body was found in rubbish bins. Ghost of Father. This video has a sad story behind it. It was caught on the security camera outside Norma Villa's home in Texas, United States. Norma's mother, Teresa, had recently moved in with her as she had terminal cancer, and Norma wanted to care for her in her final days. However, things had deteriorated with Teresa's health, and the pair were discussing whether it would be better if she went into hospice care. The emotional conversation prompted Norma to take a moment in another room, where she says she began talking to her late father, Leandro, who had passed away 10 years prior. But while sat there, she got a notification on her phone alerting her to movement that had been picked up by the security cameras on her front porch. Norma went to check the footage, expecting it to be a cat or some other animal, but what she saw was this. Norma showed her mother, and the first thing she said was, "They're coming for me." Still baffled by the footage, Norma showed her husband, who smiled, and said it was her dad, being there for her during this difficult time. Norma now believes it was the spirit of her father watching over her and trying to reassure her. This belief is reinforced by the fact that her dad always sat in that spot, and always sat outside to smoke. Sadly, Teresa passed away in February 2020, but Norma often watches the footage and finds it comforting to think that both her mum and dad are looking down on her. Douglas Park Ghost. Now this one appeared on Reddit a few years back, 2016 to be precise. It was taken in a ruined building near to the Burns Garden in the seaside town of Douglas Park in Scotland. The park is believed to lie close to a prehistoric burial ground. It's interesting because it was taken using an old 1930s TLR Rolleiflex camera and was developed by the photographer known as Motorbike 1985 on Reddit. The photographer, who was originally from the Czech Republic, took the shot when he was living in Scotland. He said that at the time of taking the photograph, he didn't feel anything out of the ordinary, as there was nobody else around. But when he developed the film in his darkroom, it became obvious he might not be alone after all. Pretty strange, and what makes it even more mysterious is that later, Motorbiker 1985 also posted the negative to the photograph that also showed the strange anomaly. What do you make of that? It's worth pointing out that the photographer is a prolific user of Reddit and posts regularly, usually about political stuff in his photography, and he does not appear to be into anything creepy. Of course, there could have just been someone in the building that the photographer didn't notice, but he definitely caught something. Whether it was an innocent visitor or something more sinister, we'll let you decide. Creepy Spirit. This footage is fairly new and caused some debate when it appeared on Reddit about a month ago. It was posted by user Crazy Turtle Mama, who appears to have experienced a lot of paranormal activity in the home she lives in Washington, USA. And in previous posts, she has documented some of the activity that includes orbs, doors unlocking by themselves, and shadow people lurking. She thinks this activity may be linked to the fact she has both her mother's and her sister's ashes in the house, especially her sister's, who she was initially reluctant to take as she felt there was a darkness surrounding them. So when her Ring camera captured something unexplained, she was convinced it was a ghost. Take a look at the footage. Initial thoughts are that it might be a person lurking around outside, although the poster has dismissed this as she checked the area in the day and there was no visible footprints. She has also uploaded a comparison video showing an actual person walking in the same area to prove the two aren't the same. We're not sure, but what do you think of this? Baby Ghost. This next one is another where it's believed to be someone who has passed is trying to make contact from the grave. In this case, it's sadly a baby. Melissa, not her real name, from Toronto, Canada, insists she has always been a paranormal skeptic, but all that changed in September 2016 after she suffered a tragic miscarriage. Since then, a series of unexplained things have happened in her home. The night she lost her child, Melissa claims a children's toy randomly turned on itself in the middle of the living room and began playing music. After that, things got even stranger. The family started hearing strange knocks on their bedroom doors and closet doors slamming shut when no one was around. The whole family have been spooked by freaky encounters they've struggled to explain. On one occasion, Melissa and her husband were in the living room where they heard something thrown into the empty kitchen sink. When they investigated, they found the lid of their son's sippy cup that had previously been placed about a foot away, lying in the sink bowl. However, the most convincing incident happened about a week after the cup incident. On May 31, 2018, when Melissa turned on her daughter's cot cam and saw this. Melissa immediately ran upstairs to pull her daughter away from the creepy figure and check she was okay. That same night, Melissa was responding to some of her friends' messages about the incident when she was further freaked out when the lamp cord on her bedside table started to move. Now, our first thoughts on seeing the footage was that it must be a doll, but Melissa has said her daughter has no dolls, just soft stuffed animals, and she believes what she saw was the ghost that haunts her house. Whether it's the spirit of the child she lost, she isn't sure, but it's no coincidence that all this activity started after this loss. What do you make of this? Not everything is what it seems. This one is a little different, and as you'll remember saying in the past, sometimes the best way to the truth is by debunking. And this one just proves that sometimes things are not always what they seem. It started off with a mum looking around an abandoned house, filming as she walked around and imagining what it must have been like when the building was occupied. She then sends the clip to her daughter, completely unaware of what is lurking in one of the windows. Take a look.
Look what I found. This is in Carmel. This great old house. Someone told me that it's the Murphy house. I don't know who the Murphys were, but I don't think they've lived here for a while because it looks pretty deserted, but it must have been gorgeous in its stay. Absolutely, I could just imagine walking around here.
Straight away, her daughter Rebecca spotted the creepy looking face staring from an upstairs window of the empty house and shared the footage to TikTok. The video gained nearly 2 million views and had thousands of comments, with many freaked out by the sinister looking face, some even saying they were going to call the police to investigate. In fact, the video caused such a stir that Rebecca decided to visit the house herself to see if the face was still in the window, and this is what she discovered.
Okay, so sorry to keep you guys waiting. I really hope that nobody did call the police, because as you can see, it's a mannequin head.
So, it was just a mannequin head. Whoever decided to put that there must have known it would scare the life out of people. Who needs guard dogs when you have a sinister looking doll's head to keep out strangers? But this one just goes to show that if she had not gone back to reinvestigate, millions of people may have thought this was an actual paranormal entity caught on camera. These next few clips were sent in by Lockie, and he is convinced that something has latched onto himself and his fiancée and is now following them around. Lockie is a skeptic by nature, but because things were getting a little too weird, he started researching the paranormal and performing experiments. Things came to a head a few years ago when he and his partner went to visit her sister in an extremely old building in Hastings, which is at the very bottom of the United Kingdom and is most famous for the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Lockie had never been there before, but his fiancée had, and she was sure that it was haunted, as was her sister. So before their visit, they bought an EMF detector, which are often used by ghost hunters to search for fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, commonly attributed to a spirit's presence. Shortly after arriving at the house, Lockie could hear noises and footsteps from the attic area. His fiancée's sister explained that when they first moved into the house, they searched the attic and found some bloody rags and several old items up there. Being keen to find out more, Lockie decided to use the spirit box up in the attic to see if he could pick anything up. Well, we have here a part of that recording session. Take a look.
Is anybody there?
Yes.
Do you have a name?
Oh, yeah.
Are you close at all? Why are you here? Where are you standing right now? Whoa, I'm down in the kitchen. Are you down in the kitchen?
No.
Through that.
Turn around.
Listen. Thank you.
Don't come near me. Don't come near me. Don't come near me.
Get yourself.
I swear to God, don't come near me.
I was getting a little busy. How many of you are there? Are you near the stairs? I'm gonna walk around. If you could walk near the device, that'd be nice.
Ever since doing this session and trying to communicate directly, Lockie and his fiancée have had all kinds of things happen to them that were not happening before this. Things like night terrors, doors opening and locking on their own in their flat, and Lockie even heard something strange whilst live streaming, which he caught on video. Take a look.
Ugh, finally. However, I'm gonna... Nothing like indulging on a little bit of red wine whilst playing The Witcher 3, where I'm eventually going to be playing the Blood and Wine. Plus there's noises in my flat. I'm getting pretty sure this place is haunted. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Okay, continuing on.
At this point, Lockie jumps up. He genuinely thought someone was in the flat. His fiancée was at work, so he was totally alone. Now, what you cannot see in this clip is that when he went into the hallway, he noticed that the bathroom door was wide open, even though it was always kept shut. There are no windows or doors in the bathroom, nor were any open in the flat at the time. What you can see here is Loki checking the fridge to see if anything had fallen in there, but there was nothing. At the time, he shook it off and had a glass of wine, as he didn't want to embarrass himself whilst live streaming. But to this day, he is still not 100% convinced, although cannot explain the weird things that are happening. What do you make of it all? Roger's Cemetery. This next clip has come from a new ghost hunting channel called Para3vident, who put together videos from their ghost hunting trips to various places around the United States. The team members are Bandy, Tobbs and Ree, and they use a variety of ghost hunting tools to try and get validation from the spirit world and prove once and for all that there is life after death. Bandy from the team contacted us personally, and we asked him, of all the ghost hunting videos they had done, which one was the most convincing. He sent us a couple of suggestions, but the one we think is the most interesting was filmed in Roger's Cemetery in Arkansas during a midnight tour of the graves. Now, we did a bit of research into the cemetery and found nothing remarkable. It's not particularly old, and it's a large city-managed cemetery with approximately 2,500 grave sites and no reported paranormal activity that we could find. That is until now. The team initially used a variety of equipment to try and make contact with the dead with little success. That was until they honed in on a couple of infant graves using a Kinect SLS camera, and something extraordinary happened. Just for those who aren't aware of this piece of equipment, it supposedly detects spirit forms that cannot be seen with the naked eye. It has an infrared light projector with a monochrome CMSO sensor that shows everything as dots arranged in 3D formation. The software sees people or ghosts by recognizing joints and movements. These then show up on the screen as stickmen. You may have seen this being used in Ghost Adventures. Now, we do not know how accurate or believable these cameras are, although a lot of ghost hunters use them, and it definitely picks something up. Whether it was the image of the restless children, well, that is up for you to decide. But check this out.
Holy crap, what is that?
They're sitting down.
Trying to crawl out of the grave.
Hello. We can see you.
Can you say something, Jack? Or Daniel? You weren't alive long enough. I know you can't say anything. He lived one day.
It looked like somebody sitting on the ground.
One day.
Pretty strange. Exploration of the abandoned Moss Vale Grammar School. This next video was sent in by Adventures with Marley, an urban explorer from Australia who did an exploration of the abandoned and allegedly haunted Sydney Church of England Girls Grammar School in Moss Vale, New South Wales. To give you a bit of background on the school, it was the place where Lenny Lawson fled to in 1961 after raping and murdering his neighbour's 16-year-old daughter. Lawson was a successful comic artist and the creator of The Lone Avenger and The Hooded Rider. And when he murdered his neighbour's daughter, he had not long been let out of prison after he assaulted and raped 5 models he had been hired to photograph. When Lawson fled to the school, the staff recognised him as he had visited there a few weeks earlier, claiming to be a novelist researching a book set in a girls' school. However, on this occasion, he produced a gun and told the teachers and pupils he was going to hold them hostage. The brave headmistress struggled with Lawson and his gun went off, tragically killing a 15-year-old pupil. Lawson was convicted and jailed again, this time for murder. However, he still managed to charm his jailers, and soon became chairman of the Inmates Arts and Crafts Society, and in 1972 helped host a concert group visiting the prison. But when they arrived, Lawson attacked a female member of the group, holding a knife to her throat before she was rescued by other inmates. The poor woman was reportedly so traumatized by the assault that she committed suicide a few years later. With all this in mind, Marley and his team approached the building with caution, and after they explored it, they believed some of the unexplained events they caught on camera could only be attributed to the paranormal activity linked to the murder. Take a look.
Yeah. Stop. So we've heard a door slam, but it might just simply be the wind, but we don't know yet. So we're trying to be as quiet as we can.
At 7:42 in the video, they all heard very heavy breathing that seemed to come from around them. Although it's hard to hear on camera, they say it was very loud in person. They then proceeded to hear strange noises in the area.
Go around, look. Go around there.
Y'all heard that yet? Sam. Come here. Just hold my camera. You're not going to get murdered. Hold my camera. Just hold my camera. So I can do this.
At the time, they thought it was nothing, but after editing, what they thought they had heard at the time was definitely not what was recorded on the camera's audio. What do you make of it? And also don't forget to check out Adventures with Marley's channel. Haunted House in Kalamazoo. Stephanie sent this one in, and here is her story. Everyone always knew that Stephanie's aunt's home in Kalamazoo, Michigan, there were strange things that happened. It was most definitely haunted. Her parents had stayed there for a short period of time, right after she was born, and both her mum and dad witnessed a rocking chair start rocking on its own. After about 10 minutes, the chair just suddenly stopped rocking. It didn't slow down, it just abruptly stopped. After Stephanie's aunt died, the family were packing up the house when her mum heard someone trying to open the basement door. At first she thought maybe a cat was trapped and went down to let it out, but there was no cat. Stephanie's stepfather also had a strange experience in the basement. He had just moved a big heavy box, and when he was done, he heard a male voice behind him say "phew." He turned around, but no one was there. Later, he was looking at the jar lids all nailed to the ceiling of an old workspace, and he said to himself, "Nice," and again a male voice said, "Yup," but no one was there. About a week later, Stephanie loaned her mum a digital recorder, and she accidentally left it on after showing her mum how to use it. After realizing the device had been recording, they listened back out of curiosity, and this is what they heard. You can hear Stephanie's mum say, "If I break it, I buy it." But then at the same time, you can hear a male voice that says 4 words that sounds like, Be warned, he knows. Who the male voice belongs to is unknown. A few months passed and the whole family felt something strange in the house, so they had a local paranormal team come in and check out the house before it was sold. Here are some clips from their exploration.
Oh, over here, there's something in the hallway.
There's something in the hallway creeping. I know, I heard it, and he heard it at the same time I did. He's going to turn.
Come on. Come on now.
When you are not in this room, there's definitely something weird back there. I don't like it down there. Okay, I know you just heard that. The back room, there's noises coming from back there.
Who's up here? Did you guys just drop something on the floor? Did you guys hear that? No, that wasn't us. Nobody
I didn't hear anything, and nobody's moved. It was like right here in this corner, and I could have sworn it was downstairs.
Mount Misery Woods Anomaly. Sometimes when exploring a place, what is in front of you is not always obvious until you rewatch the footage. This is the case in our next video, sent in by Lynn. Lynn and her team were exploring the woods in Mount Misery, Long Island, recording for her YouTube channel, Lynnfamous TV. Mount Misery is a rocky area that early colonists found near impossible to farm, and that natives claimed to be cursed. A great deal of paranormal activity has been reported at Mount Misery and the surrounding areas, especially in the woods and the road that runs through it. Visitors have reported visions of ghastly children and a woman calling for help, while others have smelled foul odours or blood and heard growling when no animals were in sight. Glowing orbs and shadow people are also a common occurrence, and Mount Misery Road is said to be one of the most haunted roads in the United States. So walking through Mount Misery Woods at night with nothing more than a flashlight and a camera takes a brave person. Take a look at this.
Completely blocking out the sky.
Did you see that? Well, Lynn didn't at the time, and only noticed what looks like someone's head floating across the screen after she reviewed the footage. It's worth remembering it was pitch black in those woods, and the only light source was the camera and a torch. So was that the apparition of some unknown soul, or is there another explanation for the anomaly? Let us know what you think, and also don't forget to check out Lynnfamous TV's channel. The creepy photobomb. A group of friends from Coventry were having a few drinks and a catch-up in a flat in Coventry in the United Kingdom. As the night went on, the 6 friends took a group photo of themselves enjoying the evening. However, when they looked back at the photograph, they were shocked to see there was someone else in the photograph who none of them knew and who wasn't present that night. Take a look. The friends were completely freaked out by the intruder and now believed the flat must be haunted. After sharing the photo with neighbours, they found out that a man who used to live in the flat died in the bath there. We have to agree, there is a clear image of another person in the photograph. It's hard to say whether it's a gaunt-looking man with long hair or a woman, but it's definitely a person, although it is possible it's just a glitch in the camera. However, if you saw that creepy-looking face looking over your shoulder that you didn't know was there, it would creep you out for sure. The photo was shared on Facebook by Rebecca, one of the girls in the photo, and has received hundreds of comments, mostly agreeing they cannot explain the image. What do you think of it? The swinging cursed doll. There is nothing quite as creepy as a cursed doll, so can you imagine the shock for the local residents of Lucinda, North Queensland, when they discovered that a creepy looking doll had appeared from nowhere on a swing near a mangrove swamp close to their town. The mysterious doll became the talk of the town, but so convinced were residents that the doll was cursed, no one was willing to go and investigate it or take it down. In fact, they were even scared to get too close to it, believing her to be a bad omen. No one seems to know how the doll got there, and few are willing to find out, as it's rumoured if you get too close or even say hello to her, then it's enough for her to curse you and bad luck will befall you. It seems that anything bad that happens now in the town, the doll gets the blame. And what makes the case more unnerving and disturbing is the fact that the local MP is well aware of the fear surrounding the doll, but has chosen to do nothing to remove her. Fort Nelson. This next photo is a follow-up from a location we featured in a subscriber's video a few weeks ago, in which we showed an apparition in the tunnels at Fort Nelson. After watching that video, one of our subscribers sent us an interesting photo. In case you haven't watched the first video, here is a little refresher. Keith sent us a photo taken by his partner in 2018 in the underground tunnels at Fort Nelson in Portsmouth, UK. The tunnels are reputed to be haunted, and the spooky dark maze that previously stored ammunition is now a paranormal hotspot. This is the photo that Keith sent in. After seeing the video, Belinda immediately sent in a very similar photo she took in the same tunnels in 2020. Belinda says the tunnels were completely empty at the time, and it was only her and her son down there. Belinda took a photo of the tunnel and jokingly said to her son, "Shall we zoom in to see if we've caught a ghost?" And this is what she saw. A creepy coincidence, or is there really a ghost lurking down in Fort Nelson tunnels? I think the Top 5's team may need to go and investigate. What do you think? The humanoid. Now we get a lot of clips sent to us from India, claiming to be of malevolent spirits or ghosts, but this next one is slightly different. It's already done the rounds online, but we haven't featured it, so we thought we would let you have a look. It is said to have been captured roaming across a newly constructed bridge in Jharkhand, eastern India, that is located close to the Chadwa Dam. The bizarre-looking creature was allegedly filmed by a passing motorcyclist on May 28th of this year. The gangly-looking figure with its long arms and pale skin can be seen turning towards the oncoming motorcycles as they slow down to take a look. Have a look at this. Now, we are taking this one with a pinch of salt, but who knows, it could be genuine. What do you think? The pub ghost. The landlord and staff at Twa Dogs Inn in Keswick, England, have long believed the pub is haunted. A resident ghost has been spotted in the pub's pool room, and in other parts of the building, footsteps have been heard, and strange unexplained noises when there is no one there. There have also been instances when freshly made beds have had the appearance that someone has been lying on them. So when Sharon, who works behind the bar at the pub, spotted something odd on all the night's CCTV footage, she took a video of it on her phone before it was deleted. Take a look. Pretty strange. Zoomed in, it does look like the fluorescent green orbs moving around are illuminating what appears to be the outline of a body with moving arms and legs. The eerie footage was captured in the beer garden of the pub, which had recently been adopted to conform with outdoor eating COVID rules, and the landlord believes the renovations may have disturbed something, resulting in the manifestation. Now, we did some research on the history of the pub that was built in 1967 on the site of a former inn that dated back to the 18th century. The pub is known for having the only stuffed specimen of the Cumbrian boggart, a creature that is half fox, half badger, although the creature is likely the product of pranksters. But apart from that, there is nothing remarkable in its history, apart from a couple of pranks. Could this ghost sighting also be one of them, or is this the real deal? What do you think? Now we have a bonus photograph for you. This one was sent in by a viewer. It was taken in the Union Memorial Garden Cemetery in Blairsville, Georgia. The cemetery is in a fairly secluded spot nestled in the hills of Blairsville. and has a reputation for being a bit creepy. The cemetery is for those without burial plots of their own, and for people who in the past may have suffered hardship in their life. The area around Blairsville was once Cherokee Nation territory until their removal by the United States in the 1830s. So historically, there has been a lot of sadness in the region over the years that could possibly contribute to unrest after death. The creepiness is not helped by the screeching of the numerous guinea fowls who inhabit the cemetery. Take a look at this photo and see what you make of it. Now, we're pretty sure that it's not fake. So could it be a camera glitch, or is this real evidence of the paranormal?